Welcome back to The Hidden Queen, the true story of Susan Pevensie, Chapter 7, The Books She Wrote. The bookshop in Oxford was crowded. Susan's 7th book, The Silver Crown, was her most successful yet. She signed for an hour, answered questions, smiled at photographs, and then a little girl approached, perhaps 7 years old, clutching a worn copy of The Lost Prince. "Miss Pevensie?" "Hello, dear. I love your books. I've read this one 3 times. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." The girl opened the book carefully, like it was something very precious. "Why is the lion always sad?" Susan set down her pen. She knew about the lion now. Eleanor had pointed it out at the church tea some years ago. Every book, always there, always watching, always sad. But why he was sad, that she'd never been able to answer. "I don't know, dear," Susan admitted. "I know he's there, but I don't know why he grieves." The girl tilted her head, studying Susan with unsettling intensity. "I think he's sad because someone he loves forgot him." The bookshop spun. "What? Someone forgot him, but he remembers her, so he just waits and watches and hopes she'll remember someday. That's why he's sad." The girl's mother appeared at her elbow. "Emma, don't bother Miss Pevensie with strange questions." It's fine," Susan managed. "She's very perceptive." She signed the book with trembling hands. The girl took it, looked at Susan with those clear, serious eyes. "I hope you remember someday, Miss Pevensie." And then she was gone. Susan sat at the signing table for a long time after the other customers had drifted away. She knew about the lion. She'd gone home after Eleanor's revelation about the lion and pulled out all her books and confirmed it. Every single one, the lion always was there, always watching, always grieving. She'd written about it in her journal, asked him questions she couldn't answer, felt the ache deepen knowing he was there in every story and still not understanding why. But this was different. Someone he loves forgot him. He remembers, but she doesn't. So he waits and watches and hopes. Susan pressed both hands flat against the signing table. Was that what the ache was? Not just something she'd lost, someone who was still there, still present, still watching from the shadows of every story she'd ever told. Someone whose name she couldn't remember. Someone who remembered hers. She sat at her desk that night at 2 a.m. and wrote in her journal, "Who are you? You're sad because I forgot you, but you remember me. You've been in every book I've ever written, watching, waiting, hoping I'll remember. Are you real? Did I really know you once?" The questions hung in the empty room. No answers came. Just the ache, the terrible familiar ache for someone whose name sat on the tip of her tongue and wouldn't quite form. Catherine was married on a perfect June day in 1973, 21 years old, radiant, certain. Susan stood in the church watching her daughter walk down the aisle and felt her heart might simply overflow. She'd done this, raised Catherine alone, through Robert's death and her family's death and 14 years of single motherhood and the wrongness that never quite left. And here was Catherine, whole, happy, beautiful, walking towards her future with her head held high. During the reception, Catherine found her mother standing alone by the window, watching the dancing with tears on her face. Mum, why aren't you dancing?" "I'm just watching, enjoying seeing you happy." Catherine took her mother's hands. "Mum, I know it wasn't easy, raising me alone after Dad died, after everyone died. I know you were carrying something I never fully understood, but you never let it touch me. You kept me safe and loved and whole. Susan's eyes filled. You were never a burden, Catherine. You were my purpose, my reason to keep going. Every single morning when I didn't think I could get up, I got up because of you. And now I'm leaving. Not leaving. Starting your own life. There's a difference, a big difference. Will you be all right, alone? Susan looked at her daughter, at Margaret across the room, laughing with someone from the church, at the life she'd built around the hole. I won't be alone, she said. I have Margaret. I have my writing. I have the grandchildren you're going to give me. She squeezed Catherine's hands. And I have everything you've already given me. 21 years of being your mother. That's not nothing. Catherine, that's everything. Catherine pulled her into an embrace, and Susan held her daughter in the middle of the wedding reception and felt for one pure, uncomplicated moment that the sacrifice had already been worth it. Whatever else she'd lost, whatever else she'd forgotten, she had this. Catherine's first child was born in March 1975, a girl, Sarah. Susan held her granddaughter for the first time and felt something she hadn't expected. Joy. Not complicated, not tinged with wrongness or searching or aching, just pure, simple, uncomplicated joy. She's perfect, Susan whispered. She has your eyes, Catherine said from the hospital bed. Look, Mum, grey-blue, just like yours. Susan looked down at the tiny face, the grey-blue eyes, the dark wispy hair, a new generation carrying something of her forward into the world. Hello, little one, Susan murmured. I'm your grandmother, and I'm going to love you so very much. Over the next 7 years, 3 more grandchildren came. Michael in 1978, Thomas in 1980, and James in 1982. Susan discovered something she hadn't expected. Being a grandmother was entirely different from being a mother. Easier, lighter, more purely joyful. She could spoil them without guilt, read to them for hours, tell them stories, give them back when they got difficult and the house got loud. She could be present without the crushing weight of sole responsibility. Just love, simple and uncomplicated. Ah, you're so good with them, Catherine marvelled one afternoon. All 4 grandchildren were sprawled around Susan in the living room while she read aloud. Sarah with her head on Susan's knee, Michael cross-legged, eyes wide, Thomas half asleep, and James with his thumb in his mouth. They're easy to love. You make it look easy. I remember how hard it was raising me alone after Dad died. You were carrying so much. Susan looked at her daughter over the heads of the grandchildren. You were never the hard part, Catherine. You were the reason I could carry everything else. And now my children are your joy. They are, Susan looked back at the 4 small faces. After 50 years of complicated everything, this is beautifully, wonderfully simple. Susan, some years later, won the Carnegie Medal, Britain's highest honour for children's literature, for The Searching Child, a book about a girl who lost something she couldn't name and spent her whole life looking for it. Catherine came to the ceremony in London. Margaret came. The grandchildren were too young, but sent a card covered in wobbly crayon drawings that made Susan cry more than any review ever did. When they called her name, Susan walked to the stand, feeling like she was watching herself from a very great distance. "Thank you," she said into the microphone. "I don't quite know what to say about these stories because I don't quite know where they come from. They arrive and I write them down, and somehow they seem to find the people who need them." She paused. "If they've helped children feel less alone, if they've given anyone anywhere even a moment of hope or comfort, or the sense that their searching means something, then they've done exactly what stories are supposed to do." The applause was long and warm. Afterward at the reception, Margaret found her standing by the window, holding her medal and staring at nothing. "So proud of you. I keep thinking about what the little girl said in the bookshop 8 years ago. The one who spotted the lion? She said he was sad because someone he loved forgot him, that he remembers her, she doesn't remember him." Susan looked at the medal. "That's what these books are, Margaret. That's the truth I've been telling without knowing I was telling it. But somewhere there's a someone who loves me and hasn't forgotten, who's been waiting for me to remember. Do you believe that?" Susan was quiet for a long moment. "I think I have to," she said finally, "because the alternative is that the ache means nothing, that the hole is just empty, and I can't bear that." "Then believe it," Margaret said simply, "because I think it's true." "Do you think he's real, the lion?" "I think you've been writing about him for 30 years. I think your readers weep over him without knowing why. I think something that real and that persistent has to come from somewhere true." Susan put the medal carefully in her bag. "I hope when I finally remember," she said quietly, "there's something worth remembering." The letter came on a Tuesday morning in October. American stamps, shaky handwriting that suggested either age or grief or both. "Dear Mrs. Pevensie, I'm writing to thank you for your book, The Searching Girl. I know it's 30 years old now, but I just found it in a used bookshop and I read it in one sitting. My daughter died 2 years ago. She was 8 years old. Since then I felt like I'm searching for something I can't name, like there's a hole inside me that nothing fills. Your book, especially the part where the girl stands by the ocean and cries for someone whose name she's forgotten. That was me. That is me. You wrote my grief before I even knew I had it. Thank you for that. Thank you for knowing somehow what this feels like. Margaret Hartwell, Boston, Massachusetts." Susan read the letter 3 times, then went to her bookshelf and pulled out The Searching Girl, a book she'd published 30 years ago. Before Robert died, before the crash, when she was 25 and barely understood loss at all. She opened it and read, and felt tears sliding down her face, because the girl in the story was her, searching for something she couldn't name, aching for someone she couldn't remember, standing by the sea, crying for a name she'd forgotten. She'd known at 25, before any of the great losses came. She'd already known what it felt like to search for something precious and irreplaceable, because she'd already lost it at 14, whatever it was. "Oh," Susan whispered to the empty room, "I've been writing about it all along, not just since Robert died, not just since the crash, always, from the very beginning." She held the letter to her chest, and somehow the books are finding the people who need them. 30 years later, in used bookshops in Boston. The house was silent around her, but Susan felt something she couldn't quite name. Not an answer, but a presence, warm and patient and vast. Someone who'd been using her all along to reach people she'd never met. She told Margaret about it at Thursday tea. She found my book 30 years after I wrote it, and it told her exactly what she needed to hear. That's beautiful. But Margaret, I wrote that book at 25, before I really understood loss. How did I already know what grief like that felt like? Margaret poured more tea. Because you'd already lost something at 14, she said quietly. Whatever it was, whatever happened to you, the loss was already in you, already shaping everything you wrote. So I've been writing from that loss all along, from the very first word. Margaret looked at her, and maybe that's the point. Maybe whatever was taken from you at 14 wasn't just taken. Maybe it was also given back to the world through your books, your writing, finding the people who needed it. Susan sat with that for a long time. That's either the most comforting or the most heartbreaking thing I've ever heard, she said finally. Maybe it's both, Margaret said gently. Maybe that's allowed. Margaret was 65 when she had the stroke. A Tuesday afternoon in September. Her daughter called Susan first. Susan was at Margaret's house within the hour. The stroke wasn't massive, but it was enough. Her left side weak, her speech slightly slurred. The confident, elegant woman who'd sat across from Susan at Thursday tea for all these years suddenly diminished in a hospital bed, frustrated and frightened and trying not to show it. Susan took her hand. You're going to be all right. You don't know that. No, but I'm going to be here either way. For the next 3 years, until Margaret died peacefully in the spring of 1993, Susan was there every day, drove her to appointments, helped with shopping, managed the practical things Margaret could no longer manage alone. Sat with her in the difficult afternoons when the weakness frustrated her and the slowness of her speech made her angry and the woman she'd been felt very far away. You don't have to do all this, Margaret said one day. Yes, I do. Why? You have your writing, your grandchildren. You don't have to spend your days looking after a half-broken old woman. Susan looked at her friend, her dearest friend. Because you've been showing up for me since Catherine was 18 months old, Susan said. Through Robert's death, through the crash, through every single hard thing. You showed up and you stayed and you never once told me I was broken or strange or wrong to be searching. Margaret's eyes were bright. I just sat with you. You did everything. Being present is everything, and now it's my turn. When Margaret died in the spring of 1993, Susan wept for a week. Not the howling grief of the crash or Robert's death, something quieter, deeper. The grief of losing someone who had known you completely and loved you anyway. Catherine came, sat with her, let her talk about Margaret for hours. She was your person, Catherine said. She was. What will you do without her? Susan looked at her daughter. I'll keep going, she said, because that's what she would want. That's what she always wanted. Keep writing, keep searching, keep reaching for whatever it is I've been reaching for. Will you be all right? I'll be lonely, Susan said honestly. All these years of Thursday's teas, that doesn't just disappear, but I'll be all right. She taught me how to be all right. She wiped her eyes. She taught me that the searching itself is prayer, that the ache is real, and that something real is always worth honouring. Susan was 67 when she found the manuscript in the drawer. From 1970, 25 years ago, she'd forgotten it was there. 60 pages yellowed at the edges, handwritten in a script that looked more urgent than her usual careful hand. A girl who'd lost something precious, who spent her life searching for it, who ached for someone whose name she could never quite say. Susan read all 60 pages in one sitting and felt chills running down her arms because it was the truest thing she'd ever written. Truer than the lost prince, truer than the searching child, truer than anything she'd published. Raw and desperate and real in a way her published books never quite were. She turned to page 61, blank. She'd stopped here. Why? She picked up her pen, tried to write what the girl found, who she'd been searching for, what name she'd forgotten. The headache hit immediately, crushing, blinding pain behind her eyes, so intense she had to put the pen down and press both hands against her temples. It receded the moment she stopped writing. She tried again the next day. Same results. And the day after that. Every attempt brought the same blinding pain. Something was stopping her. Something didn't want this story finished. Not yet. Susan put the manuscript back in the drawer, carefully, like setting down something that mattered. Not yet then, she said to the empty room, but I'm keeping it because one day I'll know how it ends. She closed the drawer. I just don't know when. Catherine came to help Susan sort manuscripts for the university archive. A lifetime of work spread across the living room floor. 17 published books, dozens of unfinished stories, fragments and notes and journals going back to 1950. All those decades of reaching for something she couldn't name. Catherine moved slowly through the piles, reading snatches here and there, her face thoughtful, something building in her. An expression that Susan couldn't quite read. She said eventually. Can I show you something? Of course, dear. Catherine held up a page from The Lost Prince. The lion's eyes held her like she was the most precious thing in any world. Is that from the first book? Yes, Catherine put it down, picked up another, and here, from The Silver Crown. Once you were a queen, someday you'll remember. She picked up another. She'd forgotten his name, but her heart remembered the shape of his love. Catherine looked at her mother. That's from The Searching Child. She gestured at the room, at 40 years of manuscripts. Mum, it's all the same story. Susan looked at the pages spread around them. What story? Someone who loved you, someone you loved back, someone you lost and have been writing about ever since without knowing that's what you were doing. Susan's throat tightened. Who was it, Mum? Who are all these books really about? The question hung in the room. Susan looked at her daughter and the manuscripts around them. 40 years of lions and searching children and forgotten kingdoms and grace that came to people who'd stopped believing they deserved it. I don't know, she whispered. I've never known. But you're right. It's all the same thing. Every book, every story, the same reaching, the same ache, the same lion watching from the shadows. But you loved him. Yes, Susan was crying now, quietly, without quite knowing when the tears had started. Yes, I must have loved him more than anything, because I've been writing about him for 40 years without even knowing I was doing it. Catherine knelt beside her mother's chair, took her hands. Maybe one day you'll remember who he is. I'm nearly 70 years old, Catherine. Susan looked at her daughter. If I haven't remembered in all these years, I don't know if I ever will. Maybe it'll happen when the time is right, when you're ready. Susan squeezed her daughter's hands. Maybe. That night, alone in her cottage, Susan sat at her desk one last time, pulled out clean paper and wrote, "Dear blank, I wish I knew your name. I've been writing to you for 40 years. Did you know that? Every book, every story, every word. I don't remember you. I don't know who you are. I don't even know if you exist. But I know I loved you. I know that when I write about the lion with gold fur and eyes full of love, I'm writing about you. I know that when I write about children searching for home, I'm searching for you. I know that every story I've told has been a prayer that maybe, somehow, you'd hear me and find me and bring me home. I don't know if you ever will. I don't know if you can, but I wanted you to know I never stopped looking, even when I forgot what I was looking for. Even when I couldn't remember your name, I never stopped. Please, if you're real, if you're there, don't stop looking for me either. Love, Susan." She folded the letter, put it in her desk drawer with all the others she'd written over the years. Letters that would never be sent, but that were written anyway. Because writing them was the only prayer she knew how to say. And prayers she learned were always enough, even when you didn't know who you were praying to, even when you couldn't remember their name, even then. Thank you. That's the end of chapter 7. Next, chapter 8.